Welcome to the Shema Podcast, the podcast for the perplexed, where Torah insights, intertwined through personal stories, as well as interviews with leading Torah scholars, demonstrate the empowering qualities of Torah and mitzvot. To share feedback, suggest future topics, or ask questions for the host or his guests, click the show notes to join the growing WhatsApp community. Now to the show.
Welcome back to the Shema Podcast, my friends. I have an amazing idea I want to share with you. I wasn't planning on doing this episode, but the culmination of my studies, what I've learned, and then yesterday when I realized that everything I've been learning is found in the parshios that we've been covering for the last several weeks. From the parshas of Shmos to Bashalach. Everything that's been occurring through this week's parsha is exactly where this idea derives. When I saw that, I was like so blown away. I knew it was timely. There was a reason why I was gaining ground in my understanding of the concept I'll be discussing. It's something you've sort of noticed that the focus of the conversations, what we've been learning, is about the real inner work that is required of us. I was thinking back on the evolution of the podcast, how one of the original ideas I had is that as I was going to move forward in my Torah observance, I knew I was going to continually make mistakes, step in that proverbial pothole in the ground, trip and fall, hurt my ankle, land with my face in the mud, all the difficulties and humiliating experiences. I figured they would all have more meaning if I could turn to those who were on the path as well and say, don't step here. Watch out for this pothole. That was the idea, one of them. And so you're sort of seeing how the episodes have come from answering questions around the idea of mitzvos observance to things like how do we navigate the business world as a from Jew, all these challenging situations. But that path sort of inevitably led up to really learning how to do the inner work. Like I quoted from before, maybe several occasions, by what I read from Rabbi Avigdor Miller. I happened to read this the first time, I think, shortly after my wife had her conversion. We got remarried. I was like, okay, I don't think I'm living in sin anymore. I'm a fully observant Jew. And then I read this from Rabbi Avigdor Miller. It says that he says to his students, the goal of a Jew is not to be from. And I was like, what? I just became from. Like, I'm here. Like, I don't get a trophy. And Rabbi Miller was saying, no, there's no trophy. That's positioning you now to do the real work. And what is the real work? It's this inner work. I think to the episode we did with Rabbi Meisel, where he was talking about how, as we know, the Torah is a blueprint for creation. It's Hashem's mind, if you will. And we are the projector of the Torah, of the blueprint onto the world. So when our internal world is not operating correctly, we see a lot of chaos and a lot of pain in the world around us. And that's why the most important thing we can do to fix all these struggles and pains in the world is to do the inner work. So we are projecting the Torah correctly and purely into creation. And that's where I really wanted to get at today, was that this means of using the mind is in a correct fashion is very formulaic. And, I've touched a lot on this idea of imagination. Several years ago, did a deep dive analysis of Rabbi Tatz's book on living inspired. And part of that was on breaking down the mental faculties and how they operate. And we've talked recently again about Rabbi Nachman's teaching that the Yetzer Hara lives in the domain of the imagination. It's come up recently with the podcast of Rabbi Pill on the power of the Hebrew months and with Rabbi Michael Cohen on Strive for Truth. A newcomer to this podcast may think that the way I organize these podcasts is deeply sophisticated and complex. That I probably bring all these parties into my office and with a big marker board map out key themes that I want us all to touch on as we cover different series throughout the month. Fact is, that is not the case at all. these things naturally arise, naturally occur. Pretty incredible. And they all tie into many things going on in my life. But let's get to this a little more, because we're talking again about the faculties of the mind and how to use it properly. The imagination, as we learned with Rabbi Michael Cohen in the last episode of Strive for Truth, imagination is what as Rob Dessler teaches, or his student really, Rabbi Carmel teaches that we can use the imagination to take intellectual knowledge and bring it to experiential knowledge, and that's what changes behavior. So it's a key idea we'll be diving into. But today we're going to be covering everything in a holistic fashion, so you totally know the map. One of my key sources for this, I've been listening to a podcast that I really enjoy, Rabbi Joey Rosenfeld. He's been doing this teaching on Rav Tzadok HaKohen on imagination. I've been really listening to it over and over. I do plan, God willing, to have him on the podcast. It happens to be that Rabbi Pill and him are very close friends, and he made the introduction last week. So we'll see. I wanted to get into this and share this idea with you. But again, and within the entire holistic modeling of how we use not just our mental faculties, but all of our faculties, as you will see. But we know to touch again on the area of imagination, the Hebrew word is madama. And I'll sort of balance and share both the Hebrew words and the English words so you get familiar with both of them. We all do. But we know the madama, the imagination, that the Yetzer Hara has such control over can take us to the depths of depravity, especially in the area of sexual lust. But there's other very problematic areas that the madama, imagination, can do as well, as we will see, and that is using it to create and imagine a future. And what happens in that case is that all the other mental faculties become subservient to that illusion, that fantasy. But let's start from the beginning of how this operates. And first, maybe I should state on why this is so important. This sequence, this system for properly using the mind is what allows us to cleave to our Creator, Deveikus. This idea you've heard over and over again on this podcast, everywhere, that is the goal, to cleave to our Creator at all times and constantly enhance that connection. So this formula for using the mental faculties as well as our physical faculties, which we'll get into on action, which is going to be a key component here in the proper sequence, is what needs to be rectified. And if you remember from earlier last year, we had Rabbi Yacobian on, and he was talking about that original sin. The original, when the virus of the Yetzer Hara was introduced, and exactly what it did. What it did was it scrambled up the order, the default order of how we, as a people, as a human race, make decisions. If you look at the world around us, you see what looks like a lot of people acting very irrational. And you're going to begin to understand why this is taking place and why it's happening with very high IQ people, very intelligent people. And what Torah does is it teaches us how to be a melech, a king. What does that mean? Well, the word melech, king, is also an acronym. Mem, Lamed, Kaf. Mem for moach, brain, intellect. Kelev, the heart, emotions. And kaved, liver, or drive. So we're supposed to use Torah through the study of Torah and learn how to drive our emotions and actions from the intellect. But you see now a lot of what happens with a lot of people is it starts with the emotions, and that influences the intellect through justification of the actions. So it's emotions, actions, and then justification of the actions. So again, you see a lot of intelligent people acting very irrational. So most of you probably heard of the idea of Chachma Bina Das, the acronym Chabad. That's where Chabad gets its name. Chachma Bina Das. Chachma being wisdom, inspiration, it's masculine, feeding into Bina, which internalizes the meaning of the idea, and Das, which means integrated knowledge. But we're going to introduce more parts here. We're going to introduce one, action. When does that fit into this equation? Also, we're going to introduce the madama, or the imagination, and the sechel, the intelligence. All these things, all these faculties go together, and in used properly in a proper sequence, that is what allows us to really propel our growth and our connection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through these, and then we're going to take it back within the context of where we learn this in the Torah, in these last parshas that we have been learning. So the correct sequence is beginning with chokmah, which is where we get direction. And this is a very quiet knowing. You may have experienced this when you have been working to solve a problem. You've been on full throttle with your sechel, your intelligence, and your madama, your imagination, going nonstop, trying to solve the problem until you are exhausted and you can't get anywhere, and you decide to lay down and take a nap. And in the space of that quietness of the mind, you wake up and realize you totally have the answer to your problem. It did not come through brute force of using the faculties of reason, the sechel, or the creative imagination, the madama. It just came from quieting the mind, asking the question and quieting the mind. Now, again, this just brings direction. It doesn't bring details, no plan, no reassurance. And without real, true bitachon, chokmah will not be acted on in many instances because there's no certainty, there's no structure built around it. The next faculty, which is feminine, is bina. It's taking that idea, that direction, that also it narrows options. It basically takes a lot of different options off the table, it sort of narrows them down. Now bina begins to bring structure to it. And the next step, and this is where you'll see when we start to go back through and see how everything gets so out of order. But the next step is actually action. It's a small action in that direction. One clean step aligned with that truth that you now know. We don't get caught up in a bunch of over-analysis. It's just movement now in that direction. And DOS, the real knowing, is something we gain now through this experience. I want to pause here for a little bit and also bring another idea to the forefront of your mind. A reoccurring theme on this podcast has been how we're here to elevate the body. We're not here to live a life and then the body dies and then we go live in a spiritual world. I mean, we do temporarily, but the ultimate goal is olam haba, which is where we get rejoined with our body and during the resurrection, because that is the representative of the work we are doing. We are elevating the body, which means the body has its programming. It has its default programming that we don't need to apologize when it behaves the way it was hardwired to be, but we need to know how to elevate it. And that's what all this is going towards. That's what this teaching is about. And the teaching on this topic doesn't end here, but I want everyone to walk away with a clear roadmap that they can build off on and begin to experience. And that's why DOS, real knowing, happens after you've taken some action and the body has been able to experience that it's okay. The nervous system has been retrained. Now you'll see as we get into this more, there's other avenues here, but let's just continue and then I want to get to the example. After the DOS, that's when you've had an experience, you train the body, the comfort is there, that is when you use the madama, the imagination. That's when the imagination has been redeemed. Because again, that's a key thing that we're talking about here, my friends. Everyone's madama, everyone's imagination is in exile. All of ours have been corrupted. This is the primary task. Everything we've been talking about elevating ourselves and coming closer to Hashem, elevating the body, and all these things. Just like Rabbi Nachman said, the battleground is really here. It's in the imagination. This is really where our fight is taking place. But when we use the imagination in the proper order, it gets redeemed, meaning what we're doing is we're now using creativity and language to bring meaning in past tense, not future projection, not prediction, just using the imagination to now explain and bring color to what we've learned, to look into the past and see what and explain what we learned, to tell the narrative around that truth, that reality. What happened in the past is reality. Again, what the problem is when things go out of order and we use the imagination to create a fictitious future. And I will tell you now that it gets masked in fake amuna and bitachon. It's a natural trick that happens because the mind is hardwired to want safety. We'll get more into this, but that is the order. And then finally, number 6 is sekel. It's the intelligence. The final part is the reasoning, because now we bring structure based off the reality we just learned. There we can begin to do planning and inputs, not outcomes. Be very clear. Once we start trying to plan outcomes, so we're using our imagination and it's being sunken into using it to imagine a future. You're going to see why this all fits into Hashem's plan and why it's also necessary. And why as you contemplate this more, you'll see why this is how the whole world goes in the opposite way. The whole world goes in the opposite ways, starting with the sekel, the reasoning and the imagination, because in a world where there is no creator, you have to find certainty and make sure everything's been worked out. But it causes you, through the imagination, to create this future outcome that's really fantasy. And so most of the world, because they may say, I believe in God, but they don't live with this idea of trust in Hashem, nor do they know this system for having this relationship with Hashem. So they have to be in control. And therefore they have to work everything through with deep analysis and imagination to feel safe before they move forward. The world they're creating to feel safe and to move forward is something they created in their mind. It is pure fantasy. It is not reality. So where does this come from? This was, I was working on this. I've been learning from all these different sources on this idea, trying to, work on myself by understanding this all better. And it just hit me. I don't know if this is a novel idea on my part, or I'm sure this is not new information by any means. But I don't know if I read this a long time ago somewhere and just got buried in my mind and then I just hit me. But like I said, when I realized wow, this is exactly what these parshas are discussing. And my first clue that got me there was, we all know when we get around to Pesach, we start talking about that Mitzrayim, Egypt, is mental restriction. We're all in this process of freeing ourselves from this mental restriction. So it was my first sort of connection point to this idea back to the redemption story. But when then I started thinking through each of these steps, the things that sort of occur, the things that do occur in the redemption story, I realized it's each of these 7 faculties being used that Hashem is training us to use. So let's go through each of these. And Parsha Shemos is where Hashem teaches us to use our Chachma. Hashem reveals himself. That reality of his identity is becoming clarified. Basically, truth is revealed. But that's all it is at this point. No exit strategy, no safety system in place, which again, the mind is hardwired to drive us towards safety, which again, when these things are not in order and when there's no bitachon and there's no amuna, what again happens is people tap into their imagination to create a fantasy world to feel safe, but it's not real. But then we get to Parshas Ve'era through Bo, and this is where Hashem is helping us develop our Bina. We're seeing the 10 miracles for us, the 10 plagues for the Egyptians. He's training us. We're now beginning to see, we had this idea originally in Shemos with Hashem revealing himself, the Chachma, but through these 10 plagues, it's bringing structure to the idea of our Creator. He controls every aspect of nature, that He is behind nature. He is nature. That's Bina, is learning about this and understanding it and taking time to really understand every facet of it by each of the experiences of the miracles for us and the plagues for the Egyptians, seeing how they didn't impact us, how they did impact them. But then you get into the Korban Pesach, the final thing we did after the 10th plague, the 10th miracle, the Korban Pesach. What was taking place here? This is an important part of Bina, because Bina narrows down. We put the blood on the door seal, and we took what was the Egyptians' god and roasted it over an oven and enjoyed an amazing roasted lamb meal. What did that do for us? We have to remember, again, put all this in the context of decision making. That's what we're getting to. Don't go in through the story, but remember, we're talking about the decision and action making process that we go through in everything, guys. There is no spiritual life and business life and family life, and it's all one life. And that entire life, whether it's business decisions, quite frankly, this is how you take business decisions and allow your business life to be integrated and allow you to connect to and cleave to Hashem. This is how everything becomes attachment to Hashem. Everything. It's all decisions go through this process. So don't think in compartmentalized terms of, well, my spiritual life and then I have my business life. No. This is every part of our life. This is how we grow. We make decisions, what drives our actions, when we act, when we use the intelligence, when we use the creativity, the imagination, etc. So what do you have to do? Back to the Korban Pesach. He had to now eliminate, it's part of Bina, eliminate the other options. In our mind, in Egypt, when we were there, we were engaged in idolatry. We got wrapped up in it. Yes, Midrash talks a lot about this. The angels are saying, during the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, why are we favoring the Jews over the Egyptians? The Jews they were involved in idolatry as well. Well, one of the things Hashem had us do was eat the God that you were worshiping. It's very visceral, physical act. It's an act. You're taking an act. You're doing a small act to eliminate the other options. Okay, it's not an act that takes a lot of courage, but it really solidifies the stage of taking the original idea of Chachma and bringing it to Bina, to really understand, get greater depth of understanding of it, eliminate the other options, take one small step, one act. And that's what Hashem wanted us to do. Putting the blood on the doorpost was not for God. He knows which rooms we were in. It was for us. It was an act of us making a choice. We are going in this path. We are going in the path of Hashem. He is our creator. We now understand that He is emanating everything into existence, and we are going with Him. And now we get to action, and that is when we actually leave Egypt. Okay? But think about this. From the mental faculties part, all we've done so far is we've got the idea, Chachma, and Bina. We begin to organize it. We have not gotten to Dash yet. We're taking action first. You're going to see why. This is why action is necessary to bridge the intellectual, which is all we've accomplished so far, with the emotional, with the body. The body is not going to be on board with any of this yet. Okay, and I want to get to that. But we take action. He leads us out of Egypt. Keep in mind, no route, no map, no guarantees. He doesn't let us fabricate, go into fantasy, and tell us how everything's going to be okay. This is all very key. Very key. And why, again, bitachon and emunah are essential. And this is why the world can't do this yet. And why we must learn how to do this. We act without really knowing the details of how it's going to end. Now we get to the sea. And this is key. This is so key. If you're new to the show and you haven't listened to other episodes I've done on this, but if you're only understanding of the crossing of the Sea of Reeds or the Red Sea is from movies, then it's not right. It's not correct at all. First, it was not a calm sea. It was storming. It was frightful. Two, the sea did not split. fully out on all sides, creating dry land that we walk through? No. Led by Nishon, who started walking to the water until it got over his nose, and then the water moved back. It did not totally split. There was no total clarity. There was no guarantees. Again, the water just moved back an inch from his nose. And he took another step forward, and the water moved back a little more. And the Jews started to follow in the same procession. Taking a step, the water moved back. Taking a step, the water moved back. I want to back up further here, because you need to understand this. And a lot of times when you see things like it's a movie or you're envisioning it as you're reading it, I want you to put yourself in your shoes, because a lot of times we read the story and it's like, oh, I would have totally done that. And you would have. We were there. But my point is that they were afraid. Even with what they witnessed in Egypt, they were afraid. Why were they afraid? Well, as I said already, Chachma Bina is all they've addressed so far, what Hashem helped them understand. Chachma Bina. Okay? The reason they don't have dash yet, which means their body is not on board with any of this. Our body has its own nervous system. What do you think the body's response is going to be? I don't care how much you intellectually know something. Again, we're talking about experiential knowledge now. The body is looking at waves tossing and turning and thunder and lightning. The body's response to that is fear. And this is what was such groundbreaking to me, because what I have been doing by using these faculties out of order and using my madama, my imagination out of order, is imagining and my expectations on what Emunah and bitachon looks like. And that bitachon looks like moving through life fearless. And of course, what was happening is Hashem was upping the game on me, as he does, because we continue to go through this process over and over. We'll touch on that. But he created life circumstances, and I became full of anxiety. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person. I don't have bitachon. I don't trust Hashem. What's wrong with me? It's like, no. Here's what you have to know. I want you to remember this. So when you get to a point in your life where Hashem really tests you, and we all have these, and it gets really stressful, bitachon is not about being fearless. Bitachon is about walking forward when you are afraid. Because it's not you. Remember, you know, you have the chachma, you have the bina, okay? But your job is to elevate your body. It is your animal sacrifice. You're dragging your body towards the altar to be sacrificed. This is sort of the idea here. You're elevating it, though. You're elevating it, but you are bringing it against its will. Now, what happened when they got through the sea? When they walked through it, even though they were afraid. Again, doesn't matter what you intellectually know. If your body knows thunder, lightning, waves, water, being submerged underwater, you can't breathe, you will drown. That's what the body knows. Not their fault to feel afraid. The body feels afraid. That's natural. It's been trained based off what its prior experiences. Their entire life, they would go into the river to bathe. They knew after so much holding your breath, you need air, right? So the body responding this way is natural, okay? Just I think that's a key part here. They kept walking. Now what happens after they get through the sea? Now they have das. The body just experienced walking, showing trust in Hashem and walking through something that was really scary, and now being okay. So now the body's nervous system has been rewired. It feels safe. It just had an experience that now can identify as a safe experience. The mind, the human mind, which is not the part that's not our neshama, right? It's hardwired to drive us towards safety. So the body learns trust through exposure by going through these experiences, which again is why Hashem is going to continually orchestrate events in our life so that we're always going to be a little shaken up, things out of sorts, so we can push our emunah and our bitachon to the next level. Why? Because we, those listening, all of us, you're listening to this podcast because you have said, I want to grow closer to you, Hashem. And this is the pathway. He creates the external situations. He creates the seas, but then he needs us to know how to use this mental framework, which is what we've learned in these parshas. So bitachon becomes lived, okay? It's not conceptual. It comes through experience. So when you hit that new challenge and you feel like your trust, your bitachon in Hashem is broken and you feel like you're some bad Jew, which I was doing, you're like, oh my God, I'm not living up to my own expectations, perfectionism, perfection is the worst. It's one of the ways imagination is used poorly. Perfectionism is the root cause of addiction. Any addict who has done their real inner work through AA will tell you that. If someone says you're a perfectionist, it's not a compliment. It means you need to do some of this work we're talking about right here. You need to really go through this, okay? But then when we get out of the sea, what's the first thing that happens? It'll be in it's this week's Parsha. We'll be reading the Shabbos, the song, the imagination. Now, again, the imagination looking and analyzing what we just learned from the past, not inventing a future, not fantasizing about a future, okay? So we all have to break. It's using imagination to understand the past and what we just learned from this experience. What's that song all about? It's about them seeing about the reality that every single thing that just happened to them throughout their lives, throughout Egypt, when Moshe first came and spoke to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh made the work more difficult, and everything they saw, all those experiences, it all made perfect sense. They saw that amazing moment of receiving this DOS and having, now they use their imagination to see how it was all in every detail was perfectly orchestrated by Hashem out of the most intense love for each of them. They saw that and they expressed that analysis using their imagination in song. And then they go out into the midbar. And this is equivalent with learning to use their sechel, their intelligence. They learn the rules of manna. They learn the camp order, learn boundaries and structures, right? And now they're sitting at the base of Mount Sinai. Now they know how to use their mental faculties. They know when action should be applied. And they are now receptacles for receiving Torah, receiving wisdom. Now, after they've gone through this tremendous experience where they leveled up, was it all over? No. They had the sin of the golden calf. They had a new situation. They had the Yetzer Hara was removed and became external in the Satan. And he went through the camp, getting everyone all worried about the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu had died, playing into what? Lack of bitachon, lack of emunah in Hashem. They had placed their trust with Moshe Rabbeinu, not the idea. We love our teachers. We honor our teachers. We look up to our teachers. We appreciate our teachers. But they're not Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu is not Hashem. And so what happened? Again, everything went out of order. They wanted to feel safe. The mind said, feel safe. We don't feel safe. Moshe Rabbeinu is dead. What do? We need to feel safe. We need to use our imagination to create fantasy, to create a reality that will make us feel safe. We'll make an idol. All this is when the imagination is trying to create a future, a fantasy future. It's creating an idol to feel safe with. That's what it is. That's what we're doing when we do this. Here's how everything in my life is going to work out. Why do we need to know how everything's going to work out? Why do we need everything planned out? Yes, you need to go in a direction. Don't get me wrong. There's a balance here. And I don't want anyone to walk away with that. But no, the moment to moment, the long term, like you don't know. And you need to accept, I don't know. I don't know the outcome. Anyone who's lived a while, I'm 56 now, I can tell you, as someone whose moon sign is Capricorn, this is why I'm learning all this right now, because I don't know if you remember, those who listened to the episode I did with Yitzchak Pincus on kosher astrology, but the idea of kosher astrology, which there definitely is a kosher astrology, if you didn't hear that, is about finding out when we come to this world, our pre-built condition so we know what our mission is. And mine, that came to a headwind about 2 years ago, but basically what it is my moon is Capricorn. It loves order, structure, discipline. My sun is a Cancer, loves abstract spirituality. And they've been growing in conflict. And the last 2 years was about integration of these two things. In order for that to happen, a lot of things had to happen in my life for me to let go of the control, to learn really what this process is like, to learn really to be okay without knowing what's going to happen in the future. But again, back to the Jews, they failed, but then they learned from that and they grew. So this is our life. But what I want you to walk away with is, and if you're listening to this while you're in your car driving, you can email me at shemapodcastshow@gmail.com. Maybe I'll put together a document. If anyone wants it, email me and say, I would like to have this written out, like exactly what this process looks like. So I can sort of have a checklist to follow when I make decisions. Because that's what I'm doing. Because again, I have to rewire and build new habits on how I approach decision making when I introduce imagination. I've let off so much with intellect, and I'm learning where that actually fits into the equation. And so this is a big project for me. Learning this, not just learning this, but I'm experiencing this. I mean, this is, I'm describing all these ideas to you as I'm living through it, and in a very big way. But again, once we get through this, we get a new level of DOS, new level connection, then Hashem will challenge us once again. But I hope this was helpful. I mean, to me, this is everything, guys. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's obviously the mitzvos, observance, and joy, and learning Torah, and all that. Yes. I'm not taking away from that. Don't take that. But again, this is what's going to propel us along that growth of better observance, improving it's all about improving connection. In this decision-making roadmap, how to use our mental faculties, when to introduce action, etc., it's key. And now that you know that, again, I think anyone who hasn't hit big crisis in their life, and eventually everyone does, but it will be less. It'll be, if you have trained yourself in this, it's going to be smooth for you, okay? No, it will be challenging. You're still going to have to walk through seas when your body's like, I don't want to go there. I'm afraid. And you're going to have to tell your body, move forward anyway, until your body gets through it and says, oh, we are safe, aren't we? You're like, yeah, we are. And you've elevated your body, okay? But at least you're not going to stumble through it by using faculties out of order, okay? Trying to use your intellect to do analysis paralysis because you're just afraid to move forward, and use your imagination to create fantasy worlds. We have to redeem the imagination. This is what the Yetzer Hara has such control over. Now, I don't want to go too long here, but you can sort of see now that another way that Rabbi Nachman talks about elevating the Madama, the imagination, is through the study of Gemara. Men, I think, have much more challenge in this area. Women, he said, just reading Tehillim, because you're just building Emunah. But for men, I think because we're just wired differently, but the Gemara is another way of elevating that without going through these experiences with such intensity. And I even heard Rabbi Yokov Wolbe told me, I don't remember the source he said, but we can rest assured there's a source if he said it to me, that someone who really struggles with Gemara all day long, that the Torah says that they will be freed from a lot of these challenges. Why? Because they're training their nervous system another way. Because what happens when you study Gemara is, and it's different than studying Chumash or other areas of Torah, because you're learning these arguments back and forth. You're all these different angles, right? And he says this, you're like, oh, wow, that makes total sense. And so someone else speaks up, it's like, no, but it shouldn't be this, it should be that. And you're like, oh, well, he makes total sense, You're like, and then how they most often end? They end with no conclusion. And it seems so unsettling. We want to know, well, what's the conclusion? Oh, we'll have to wait for Mashiach. We don't know. See, that's the idea. You're learning how to make peace with not knowing. I'm going to say that again. You learn how to make peace. Train the nervous system to be okay with not knowing. What you learned was all the arguments, different sides of everything. You got Bina, and you got the DOS from not knowing how the argument concludes, but by being able to make peace and experience that. That's why people are really engaged in Gemara all day long. I mean, they can avoid a lot of the tests because Hashem is that roadmap for training them. But everyone, for the most part, I think, is, from what I've learned, experiences both. Again, there was a reason why when Hashem first showed us how to use our mental faculties through the redemption process, that he made us walk through a sea. He didn't give us Gemara. He wanted to show us how to put our body in a situation of shock and fear, and how to pull it forward and get DOS and train it. This is the pathway, my friend. So again, I hope I caused you to avoid falling into the potholes that I have stepped in, where I have fallen over, fell on my face, look like a fool. I hope that you now know this roadmap, that you will go through life just accelerating level after level after level, growing and growing, and not have to experience some of the hardships I've had to experience learning this. Again, if you are in the WhatsApp group and you want me to sort of put together a schematic in writing, I think I may do that for myself. I already have sort of written it out here on paper, but I may do it more organized so I can follow it, so I can make sure I'm always following decisions in this path, like a checklist to sit there and say, are you doing this, Dan? Are you doing things out of order? Because it's going to be very easy for my mind to want to go back to its default programming it's used for 56 years. So I'm going to have to be very methodical as I retrain myself. So I think I will be doing that if that's something you want. Again, or if you're not part of the WhatsApp community, please join. It's a great group. Again, very supportive people just wanting to learn and grow. Or you can email me at Shema Podcast Show, and I'll be happy to email that to you. Thank you again for listening. And I don't ask this a lot, but please rate the podcast. Please write a review. Again, I have nothing to gain. I don't monetize this, but I would love to have, if this is valuable, to share it with more people, just have an impact on more people. Again, my monetization is I go to Shemayan after I lived a long life, and I'm shown all these incredible mitzvos, Jews I help in some way bring back closer to Torah and Hashem, and it's because of this podcast. That's my monetization. I'll take it in the next world. So please help me with that effort and share it. Write reviews if you haven't written one, and rate it. So thank you so much for listening, my friends.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast.